Welcome to the One in the Many. My name is Arshak Ben-Lian. My purpose with the One in the Many podcast is to explore the process of integration as developmentally formative and therapeutically corrective factor in human psychology. The One in the Many is the study of how conscious life differentiates identity, integrates relation, regulates itself under constraint, and sustains direction through time. Subscribe to the One in the Many podcast and connect with me by writing to abenlian@oneinthemany.net. The modern conception of civilization rests upon the principle of the division of labor, a triumph of efficiency, specialization, and productivity. Yet beneath its triumph lies an unexamined premise that man's consciousness is not the source of causality, but merely a function of material or systemic necessity. When the intellect denies volition, it must find another means to preserve the illusion of order. The division of labor becomes that substitute, a social compensation for the metaphysical vacuum of determinism. Determinism, in all its variants, removes the active principle from being, whether the cause is assigned to atoms, genes, history, or logic. The conclusion is the same. Consciousness does not cause, it reacts. In such a universe, order may exist, but no meaning can. For meaning presupposes purpose, and purpose presupposes choice. This absence constitutes a metaphysical vacuum. Existence remains, but the breach between existence and awareness collapses. The mind, stripped of volition, becomes a spectator to motion it cannot direct. Causality persists in the external world, but not in the self. The individual becomes a sequence of effects without source or standard. In the One in the Many, this vacuum marks the true death of philosophy, when the living principle of integration is replaced by the mechanical imitation of sequence. To restore volition is to refill the vacuum with being, to re-establish consciousness as the causal axis of experience, the unity that makes knowledge possible and civilization intelligible. Whether proclaimed by materialism or by a rationalism stripped of freedom, determinism presents man as a derivative being, his choices predetermined by biology, environment, logic, or history. In such a universe, creativity becomes impossible, progress accidental, morality a fiction. To escape the despair of impotence, civilization turns outward. It builds a network of external functions to simulate the coherence that the mind has forfeited within. Thus, the division of labor emerges not only as an economic arrangement, but as a psychological refuge, a way to assign meaning through stratified participation when inner unity has been abandoned. In the deterministic worldview, stratification replaces integration. Since man's consciousness is presumed impotent, his significance must be borrowed from his position in the system. The scientist, the bureaucrat, the laborer, and the manager derive worth not from understanding, but from role. Fragmentation masquerades as order. Each part becomes indispensable precisely because the whole has no living center. The coordination of doing substitutes for the integration of being. Efficiency replaces purpose. Interdependence replaces understanding. This fragmentation brings relief. For the man who does not believe in free will, narrow function is a sanctuary from the abyss of meaning. He can labor without reflection, contribute without conviction, and justify survival by the momentum of the collective. The division of labor in such a culture becomes an anesthetic against the pain of disconnection, a moral sedative that allows one to belong without the burden of becoming. In this condition, survival is elevated as the shared value precisely because life has been drained of its personal standard. To live, once a creative act, becomes to persist through specialization. Each man guards his fragment, and the system as a whole appears to function, so long as no one asks why. The Industrial Revolution stands as one of humanity's greatest demonstrations of differentiation, and one of its gravest experiments in disintegration. In the early 19th century, when steam and steel replaced muscle and craft, the division of labor reached a scale unprecedented in history. Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations had already outlined its practical efficiency. The pin factory, a symbol of progress, each worker performing a single motion to produce thousands of pins a day. Yet, as the mechanism of production multiplied output, it began to divide the soul. The craftsman who once conceived, shaped, and completed an entire object now performed a single repetitive gesture. Knowledge of the whole, the sense of authorship, was surrendered to the system. What remained was the function, detached from purpose. As Marx later observed with bitter irony, man became an appendage of the machine. His insight was descriptive, not prescriptive. He saw alienation, but not its cause. The root was not capitalism, but the deeper metaphysical conviction, shared across ideologies, that man was a product of forces rather than a source of them. Industrial determinism mirrored philosophical determinism. The assembly line was the physical corollary of a mechanistic mind. Order without understanding, production without consciousness, motion without meaning. Even as wealth expanded and comfort spread, anxiety and nihilism shadowed modern man. The machine magnified its power while diminishing his sense of agency. In psychological terms, the era externalized cognitive specialization. It trained minds to see in parts, to optimize fragments, to treat thought as a tool of procedure rather than a faculty of integration. This mentality later seeped into academia, government, and even the arts, where classification, methodology, and division of fields supplanted the holistic pursuit of truth. The division of labor became the template of thought itself. Yet the very same revolution that fragmented man also provided the raw material for his reintegration. When specialization reached its limit, when efficiency began to erode meaning, thinkers from different disciplines began seeking unifying principles again. From Maxwell's unification of electricity and magnetism to Einstein's fusion of space and time, from Montessori's unification of education and psychology to Rand's unification of reason and ethics, the historical arc revealed the underlying law that differentiation without integration decays into contradiction, while integration restores the vitality of progress. The industrial age thus represents both the triumph and tragedy of division. It proved the potency of focused energy, yet revealed that focus without synthesis is blindness in motion. The machine could amplify men's hands, but only the mind could integrate their purpose. Against this determinist inheritance, the one in the many reasserts the principle that integration is the measure of freedom. The division of labor is not evil in itself. It is the natural expression of differentiation. But it becomes moral only when guided by integration of purpose. When each act of specialization serves the hierarchy of rational values within the self, productivity becomes an extension of consciousness, not a substitute for it. True cooperation arises not from shared dependence, but from shared independence, from the mutual recognition that every producer integrates his work through volition. The division of labor then ceases to be an escape from metaphysical responsibility and becomes instead its affirmation, an outward manifestation of inward unity. In this light, the real division of labor is internal before it is external. It is the division of function within the self, the sensory, emotional, rational, and volitional systems operating in concert under the rule of integration. Society merely mirrors what the soul achieves first. When the individual disintegrates, the culture stratifies. When the individual integrates, the culture unifies. Integration restores to the division of labor its original purpose, not to appease the despair of the deterministic mind, but to extend the freedom of the creative one. The moral revolution of integration begins when man no longer seeks refuge in fragments, but assumes command of the whole. Then let us emphasize this point in repetition. The external division of labor mirrors the inner division of function within the psyche. At the base lies differentiation, each sensory, emotional, and cognitive unit performing a specialized task. Above it lies integration, the volitional synthesis that unites them into purpose. When volition governs the hierarchy, the individual becomes a self-directed system. When it abdicates, the same hierarchy collapses into stratification. Just as the worker's task finds meaning only within the larger purpose of production, each psychological subsystem finds meaning only through the integration within the self. Thus, the moral revolution of integration restores the parallel between civilization and consciousness, as within, so without. As one integrates, many flourish. Thus, this process is not a line, but a spiral of integration, from differentiation to reintegration. The spiral of integration represents the reciprocal law of progress. Each differentiation calls for integration. Each integration, when stabilized, calls for reintegration at a higher level of order. In the individual, this manifests as the developmental path from learning in childhood to understanding in adolescence to creation in adulthood. In civilization, it unfolds as the arc from craft to industry, industry to capitalism, and capitalism to the integrated individual, the free mind that directs his labor by the unity of volition and value. When integration fails, the spiral flattens into a circle of repetition, specialization without renewal. When integration succeeds, differentiation expands again, energized by purpose. Thus, history and psychology are both spirals of integrations. One embodied in time, the other in consciousness. The moral spiral reveals the psychological geometry of virtue. Each virtue is not an isolated principle, but a phase in the self's ongoing integration. Rationality differentiates truth from falsehood. It is the induction of mind. Productivity integrates thought with reality. It is the integration of value. Self-esteem reintegrates the individual with existence. It is the reduction of moral codes into identity. This triadic progression mirrors the law of energy in motion. Each act of rational identification equals potential energy, seeks its productive realization, kinetic energy, culminating in the equilibrium of self-esteem, renewed energy. When the cycle completes, the moral spiral ascends, each turn higher, each synthesis richer. To fragment these virtues is to arrest the spiral. Reason without work becomes floating abstraction. Work without pride becomes servitude. Pride without reason becomes illusion. To integrate them is to live, the one in the many in the one. So let me recap this dynamic, the architecture of integration in man and civilization. When consciousness integrates, civilization rises. When it fragments, history repeats. Every civilization mirrors the structure of its minds. Where the individual integrates sensation, emotion, reason, and volition, the culture harmonizes worker, manager, creator, and philosopher. When volition rules the hierarchy, function serves purpose. When volition withdraws, stratification replaces unity. Progress follows a spiral, not a line. Each differentiation calls for integration. Each integration, once stabilized, demands reintegration at a higher order. This rhythm governs neurons, minds, and nations alike. Virtue is the physics of moral energy. Reason, potential, productivity, kinetic, and self-esteem, equilibrium. To separate them is to halt motion. To integrate them is to live by principle as creative cause. The one in the many, the architecture of integration, is a single law expressed across domains: biological, specialization of organs unified by homeostasis; psychological, differentiation of faculties unified by volition; economic, division of labor unified by purpose; moral, virtues differentiated yet integrated by reason; cultural, individuals differentiated yet harmonized by liberty. Each plane recaptures the same structure, the one in the many, the living unity that makes multiplicity intelligible and purpose sustainable. When differentiation serves integration, energy flows upward, from matter to mind, from task to purpose, from existence to meaning. When integration collapses, energy disperses into determinism, bureaucracy, and nihilism. To live as an integrated self is to align the spirals of cognition, production, and morality into a single ascending motion. the creative evolution of consciousness itself. This is the one in the many. The principle of life is the process of integration from a single cell to an ideal human being. The story of life unfolds through integration, from a single percept to a library of knowledge. Through virtue, reason, honesty, independence, selfishness, productivity, you set your values, purpose, to achieve self-esteem and happiness. Through time and energy, from induction to integration to reduction, the smallest particle unifies matter, and the highest purpose unifies your life. You, the one in the many, matter. May you integrate your life with value-driven days.